My name is Michael, and for nearly a decade I believed that my life with my wife, Sarah, was built on trust, comfort, and unwavering loyalty. We had always shared the same routines and dreams. Even when life grew hectic, we found solace in the little moments that we cherished together. I was proud of our life. We had our home in a friendly suburban neighborhood and enjoyed weekend outings, quiet evenings, and the occasional dinner at a favorite restaurant. Everything felt perfectly in place, until one ordinary afternoon that unraveled the facade of our contentment. It began innocently enough. Sarah had been mentioning for weeks that she needed to upgrade her smartphone, a device she claimed would help her stay more organized and connected. As an enthusiast of the latest technology, I supported her decision. One Saturday, she suggested visiting the new Apple store that had recently opened in our city center. I remember the bright, sleek interiors, the minimalist displays, and the sense of excitement that buzzed in the air as customers flocked to explore the latest gadgets. Little did I know that this visit would mark the beginning of something I could never have anticipated. At the Apple store, Sarah was greeted by Ethan, a consultant with a warm smile, impeccable manners, and an obvious passion for technology. Ethan's enthusiasm was infectious. He walked her through the newest iPhone model with the kind of attention and expertise that made her eyes light up. I later recalled that his voice was soft yet confident, and his gestures were deliberate, emphasizing every feature with genuine delight. Sarah listened intently, asking questions about storage, camera quality, and battery life. I could tell she was excited, and I felt nothing but admiration for her interest. Yet, as the minutes passed, I noticed something subtle, a look of admiration in Sarah's eyes that wasn't solely about technology. It was a spark that glowed a little too warmly whenever Ethan smiled or complimented her choice of accessories. After her consultation, Sarah left the store with a brand new device carefully tucked into her bag. She was noticeably energized, chatting animatedly on the drive home. At first, I admired the way the simple act of updating her phone seemed to rekindle a youthful excitement in her. We spent the evening together, talking about trivialities and planning our upcoming week. I remained blissfully unaware that behind her bright smile, something had shifted in her heart, a quiet betrayal that was already taking shape. In the days that followed, Sarah's visits to the Apple store became more frequent. At first, I rationalized it as a renewed interest in technology. But soon, she began mentioning small details about the store, her favorite consultant's name, and the subtle manner in which Ethan would always remember her preferences. I listened to her with half an ear, attributing these details to her enthusiasm for the new gadgets. Yet, each mention of Ethan felt like a tiny incision in the foundation of our shared life, a detail that I could not quite piece together, but that began to disturb me more than I cared to admit. During our quiet Sunday mornings, while I read the newspaper and Sarah scrolled through her phone, I noticed her fingers would occasionally pause over a particular message thread. I tried not to read too much into it, convincing myself that it was simply work or friend chatter. But deep down, I sensed an undercurrent of secrecy, a gap in our once-open communication that made me uneasy. I recalled the pleasant, warm tone of Ethan's voice from that day at the store, the way Sarah's eyes shone when describing his assistance, and I wondered if that spark was the result of genuine admiration for technology or something else entirely. As weeks turned into a month, the routine visits evolved into something more intimate. Sarah would often mention that Ethan offered to help her set up her device personally, ensuring that every app was perfectly aligned and every setting customized to her liking. I began noticing that her time at home was no longer solely filled with our familiar shared moments. Instead, she seemed preoccupied with the vivid excitement that followed her trips to the Apple store. Her texts and calls would sometimes include a hurried thanks to Ethan for making her day better, and though she insisted it was strictly professional, a part of me couldn't help but feel the sting of something deeper, a betrayal that I couldn't yet name. That first crack in our marital bliss grew into a slowly widening fissure in my heart. I spent countless nights lying awake, questioning whether I had overlooked subtle signs while I was lost in my own routine. Every memory of Sarah's gentle laugh, every touch of her hand that I once took for granted, now haunted me with uncertainty. The man I had trusted implicitly was now faced with the possibility that the warmth in her eyes when she mentioned Ethan was not a mere byproduct of customer service excellence, but the residue of something far more insidious, a longing for something else. By the end of this period, the image of the Apple store and its charismatic consultant had become an indelible symbol of the unknown. I began to fear that my life, once so secure and predictable, was being quietly dismantled by the very moments I had taken for granted. In the quiet solitude of our evenings, I would replay every conversation, every fleeting smile, every double take that I might have missed. The seeds of suspicion had been planted, and though I did not yet fully understand their origin, I could sense that something was irreversibly changing in our relationship. As the days passed, the routine excitement that had accompanied Sarah's visits to the Apple Store began to reveal an undercurrent of deception. I found myself watching her more closely, trying to catch a glimpse of a truth I wasn't ready to face. There were subtle changes in her behavior, a lingering pause before answering my questions about her day, the way she averted her gaze when I casually mentioned the store, and the sudden flurry of texts that she would hastily delete when I walked into the room. One Friday evening, after a long day at work, I returned home earlier than usual. I expected to find Sarah in the kitchen, preparing dinner as she often did. Instead, I discovered her phone buzzing repeatedly on the coffee table, a series of unread messages that filled me with an inexplicable dread. Her screen displayed names I did not recognize, and though I quickly looked away, the seed of doubt had firmly taken root in my mind. I began to scour my memories for signs of change, the subtle expressions on her face when discussing Ethan's recommendations, the way she described his assistance in a tone that bordered on admiration. Every detail, however minute, contributed to the growing tapestry of betrayal. The tension in our home became palpable. Our conversations, once light and affectionate, now carried an undercurrent of awkwardness. I tried to discuss my concerns in passing, casually asking about her latest visit to the store, but she would only offer a quick, dismissive smile and change the subject. I began to feel like an outsider in my own life, a man surrounded by the echoes of a shared past that was now clouded by secrecy and half-truths. The more I questioned, the more evasive her responses became. My colleagues noticed a change in me too. At work, I found myself distracted, my thoughts drifting back to Sarah's mysterious behavior. I started researching the psychology of betrayal, reading countless articles and personal stories of those who had experienced similar heartaches. In those late nights of solitary reading, I wrestled with the bitter realization that I might be on the verge of discovering that the woman I loved was leading a double life. I confronted myself with the painful possibility that my long-standing trust had been exploited by the allure of a charismatic consultant. One particular afternoon, I decided to visit the Apple Store, ostensibly to purchase a new accessory for my own phone, but mostly to see if I could learn something about the environment that had captured Sarah's attention. I entered the store, my eyes scanning the bright displays and the modern, sleek design. I asked a few casual questions, and the staff was friendly and efficient. But as I looked around, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a world where my wife had found something irresistible, a world where Ethan's charm might have planted the seeds of betrayal. I even asked subtly if anyone had mentioned Sarah's name recently, but the response was vague and unhelpful. The store remained an enigma, its polished surfaces and cheerful staff belying a darker undercurrent that now haunted my thoughts. Back at home that night, Sarah's behavior grew increasingly furtive. I noticed she was on her phone more than usual, her eyes fixed on the screen as if she were receiving messages that held the key to a secret life. I tried to ignore the uneasy sensation in the pit of my stomach, but it only grew stronger with each passing day. I began to keep a mental log of small details, the time she left for the store, the nature of her responses when I casually mentioned her day, and the way her demeanor would change when she thought I wasn't watching. Each detail added weight to the suspicion that my heart had been shattered by a betrayal that I could no longer ignore. Late one night, as I lay awake in our dimly lit bedroom, I heard the faint sound of a notification, a soft chime that signaled another incoming message on Sarah's phone. My heart pounded as I considered the possibility that each chime was a reminder of her growing distance, a digital footprint of her secret conversations. The sound, so innocent in another context, now became a harbinger of the hidden world she was building without me. In that quiet moment, I resolved to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I knew that I could no longer remain in the dark, that the silence between us was now a chasm filled with unspoken lies. The gathering storm within me reached its crescendo one fateful Saturday afternoon. I had tried to ignore the mounting evidence and the gnawing pain of betrayal for too long. My heart, heavy with suspicion and sorrow, compelled me to confront Sarah once and for all. I waited until she returned from her routine visit to the Apple Store, determined to ask the questions that had haunted me for weeks. When she finally walked through the door, her smile was tentative, her eyes darting away as if she sensed the storm that was about to break. I greeted her as usual, but the warmth in my voice had been replaced by a measured coldness. After a brief, strained conversation about trivial matters, the weather, plans for dinner, I steered the discussion toward the subject that had become impossible to avoid. "Sarah," I said quietly, I need to talk to you. I've noticed changes in your behavior over the past few weeks, your frequent visits to the Apple Store, the messages on your phone. I need you to be honest with me. What is really going on? For a long, excruciating moment, silence reigned between us. I watched as her eyes filled with a mixture of fear, guilt, and sadness. The gentle facade that had once been so familiar to me was now replaced by a stranger I scarcely recognized. Slowly, with tears welling up in her eyes, she began to speak. Michael, I'm so sorry, she stammered, her voice trembling. It started when I met Ethan at the Apple Store. I thought it was just admiration for his expertise, but then something changed. I found comfort in his attention, a spark that I never expected to feel. I never meant to hurt you. Her confession hit me like a tidal wave. Every moment of doubt, every sleepless night spent piecing together subtle clues, now converged into a single, devastating truth. I felt as though my entire world was collapsing around me. So, you've been having an affair? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet heavy with the weight of years of trust and love now betrayed. Yes, she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't plan it. I felt lost, unappreciated sometimes, and Ethan, he listened. He made me feel special in ways I haven't felt in a long time. Her words, filled with regret and sorrow, offered no justification for the betrayal. They were merely an explanation of how a moment of vulnerability had spiraled into something irreversible. I struggled to control my emotions. The anger and hurt were overwhelming, yet I also felt a deep sadness for the woman I once knew, a woman who had shared my dreams and built a life with me. How long? I asked, my voice steadier now, though every word was laced with pain. Several months, she confessed. I know I should have told you sooner, but I was scared, and I didn't want to lose what we have. I thought I could manage both, but I was wrong. Her words were a bitter admission of a mistake that had shattered our foundation. The conversation unfolded slowly, every sentence chipping away at the life we had built together. I asked her about the moments we had missed, the texts she'd hidden, the secret smiles that now burned in my memory. With every revelation, my heart broke a little more. I listened to her apologies, her explanations of loneliness and the lure of attention, all the while feeling as if my entire identity was being questioned. In that painful moment of confrontation, I realized that the betrayal was not just about an affair, it was about a deep, underlying disconnect that had festered between us for far too long. The woman I had loved so dearly had found solace in a place I could never have imagined, the bright, sterile corridors of an Apple Store, where a consultant's charm had lured her away from our shared life. I felt a mixture of sorrow, anger, and resignation, knowing that nothing could undo the damage done. I stood up, my voice now firm with resolve. I need time to process this, Sarah. I need to understand how our love, which I thought was unbreakable, could be so easily compromised. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, or ever. Her eyes pleaded with me for some form of redemption, but the trust we once shared lay in ruins before us. As I walked out of our home later that day, each step was heavy with the knowledge of betrayal and the uncertainty of the future. I realized that confronting this truth was only the beginning of a long, painful journey toward healing, a journey that would force me to redefine who I was and what I deserved in life. The hurt was overwhelming, and though I felt a deep desire for retribution, a small part of me longed to find the strength to forgive. Yet, in that moment, forgiveness felt like an impossible dream. In the weeks that followed the confrontation, I found myself walking a tightrope between despair and the desperate hope for renewal. The betrayal, Sarah's secret meetings with Ethan, the long hours at the Apple Store, and the hidden messages had shattered the illusion of our perfect life. I spent countless nights alone, grappling with the painful truth and questioning every moment we had shared. The quiet of our home was now filled with memories that stung like shards of broken glass. I sought refuge in solitude and in my work. Each day, I poured my emotions into sketches and designs, finding that creativity was the only outlet that allowed me to process the overwhelming hurt. The lessons I had learned about trust and betrayal slowly transformed into a catalyst for personal growth. I began to see that, while the pain of losing Sarah's fidelity was almost unbearable, it also forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities and the silent cracks in our relationship. Friends and family offered support, urging me to find ways to rebuild my life. I attended therapy sessions where I learned that healing was not about forgetting the past, but about integrating its lessons into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. I realized that the betrayal, as devastating as it was, could eventually serve as the foundation for a new beginning, a life built on honesty, self-respect, and a deeper understanding of what I truly deserved. Meanwhile, Sarah tried to salvage what remained of our marriage. We had long, difficult conversations about love, expectations, and the mistakes that led us to that fateful moment at the Apple store. But with each conversation, it became clear that the wound was too deep to simply heal with words and apologies. Our home, once a sanctuary of shared dreams, had transformed into a place of painful memories and unspoken regrets. In the midst of this turmoil, I began to rediscover passions and interests that had lain dormant for years. I reconnected with old friends, took up running to clear my mind, and even started volunteering at a local community center. Slowly, I built a life that was independent of the shadow of betrayal, a life where I could reclaim my identity and forge a path toward renewal. While the hurt would always linger, I came to see it as a scar, a reminder of the lessons learned and the strength I had gained through adversity. Now, as I stand at the threshold of a new chapter, I look back on the journey with bittersweet clarity. The memory of Sarah's betrayal remains a sharp pain, a wound that has forever changed the contours of my heart. Yet, from those ruins, I have found a way to rebuild, a way to honor the past without being defined by it. I have learned that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can find the courage to rise again. This is not a story of revenge or regret, but a story of transformation, a journey from shattered promises to the gradual emergence of self-respect and renewal. Though the scars of betrayal may never fully disappear, they serve as constant reminders that I survived a love that faltered and emerged stronger on the other side. And in that strength, I find hope for a future where trust, though once broken, can eventually be rebuilt, not necessarily with the one who betrayed me, but within myself.